Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Michael Clinton, who's here to share with us his book, Roar, into the second half of your life. So are you seeing your industry dramatically evolve and you need to make some changes? Well, today's show is just for you. So Michael Clinton is the former president and publishing director of Hearst Magazine and is a current special media advisor to the Hearst Corporation CEO. He's also an author and photographer who believes that everybody should strive to live their fullest life possible, especially in the second half of life. Michael has traveled through 124 countries and has run marathons on 7 continents, is a private pilot, a part owner of a vineyard in Argentina, and has started a nonprofit foundation. He holds 2 master's degrees and still has a long list of life experiences that he plans to tackle. So welcome to the show, Michael Clinton.
It's so great to be with you. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. You know, I just absolutely loved reading this book. There was so much great information. What inspired you to write this?
Well, the book, as you know, is called Roar into the Second Half of Your Life. And, if you're 45 or 50 or 60 and you're healthy, you have a really good shot of living to be 90 and maybe even 100, if you're healthy and you take care of yourself. And I think the construct that was handed down to us by our parents and also by government policies and corporate business policies is going to be completely irrelevant, because we're going to be able to write the script for a whole new kind of second half of life, because we're going to all live a long and healthy arc, hopefully. So I wanted to put a punctuation point about that. I interviewed 40 amazing people who made big changes in midlife, knowing that they were going to have many, many more years ahead of them. So that was really the inspiration behind the book.
Well, I know ROAR is an acronym too, and I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you. It's a 4-part process. The first R is reimagine yourself before others do it for you, because, life happens. People get laid off, partners leave, you might have some kind of a natural disaster in your town or city that affects, what your future is going to look like. So think through the reimagination process and reimagine your favorite future. A lot of that is visioning, and in the book there are a lot of resources and tools as to how you can do that. I call those people the reimagineers, by the way. The O is own who you are. At midlife, you've now lived 45, 50 years. You know a lot about yourself, and also in the past, you've made some smart decisions, some bad decisions, but just kind of own them and just move forward, and don't let those burden you down. So own where you are and where you can go from there, but also own your numbers. It's amazing to me, Marianne, how many people, when you ask them their blood pressure or their heart rate or just basic health fundamentals, they don't know those numbers. And, it's a bit of a cliche, but it is true that good health is the key to everything. So own those numbers, own your financial numbers, own your goal numbers in general, and own your strengths, your weaknesses, but also your failures, because failures are life lessons. The A is act on what's next for you. Be courageous. Make an action plan. One of the chapters is all about life layering, which is a great concept that I put into my life, many, many years ago, that I'm sharing, and as well as the stories of the people in the book. And the final R is reassessing your relationships. And, in order to move forward, to make a change in however you want, in whatever area you're in, you need the support of family and friends and colleagues and community. They're the ones who are going to help facilitate where you want to go. So surround yourself with your posse, the people who are going to really help you, lift off into a new direction that you may want to take. So it's a 4-step process. The book is, as is accessible and readable and action oriented. So, that's the construct.
Well, I really like how you put all that together. And when you talk about reimagining ourselves, I think a lot of people are going, well, how can I even do that? Where do I get started?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you have to start by saying, where is it that you want change? And it's interesting. I interviewed a woman in the book, Michelle, who decided to have a year of change and change everything: her profession, her personal life, her lifestyle. That's a big order. But sometimes you just focus on one thing. So, for instance, if you are 45 or 50 once again, and you want to change, you've worked in a particular industry and you want to change that industry or that career, you have to do the work to do that. Some of it may lead to more education. A lot of people say they can't afford to go back to school, but the fact is there's a lot of money for adults that are available with Pell Grants and federal grants, and even some states, if you're 50 or 60 plus, you can go to college for free. So there are lots of ways that you just have to spend the time and do the homework and focus on what it is that you want to do. So my recommendation is pick one thing, become an expert in change on that thing, and then use those skills for future changes in the later years.
Well, I'm sure you get people saying, gosh, I really don't know what I want to do, and change is scary for me. So, I mean, how do you address those people?
Yeah, change is scary. I think, we have to pull it apart and ask why are we putting a barrier in front of us? I did an interview with a psychologist, Dr. Anastasia Parsons, in the book, and she said a lot of people, as they get older, they have what she calls negative self-talk. And negative self-talk is, I didn't do this, or I could have done that, or I might have done this, and we work ourselves into a box, and we have to work ourselves out of that box with, ways that we can move it forward. And part of that, how do you do that? Part of that is, I'll go back to the visioning idea. I personally keep a year-long journal, and I check it every month to see how I'm progressing on my goals. And that is a great tool for many people. And there are many other tools that are in the book. And the other thing is breaking down why it is that you think you're fearful, and finding the courage to take that first step in a new direction. Oftentimes that first step is the hardest, but once you get on that track, it's amazing how it sort of flows forward. So identify why you're afraid to make the change, and then, break it apart, and then take that first step.
Well, I think that's such great advice. I mean, especially when we're looking to reinvent ourselves in ways that, maybe we haven't been able to do in the past. And I really appreciate, in your book, you talk about being our true selves. And I'd love for you to share why that's so important.
It's probably the biggest theme in the book, in that being true to ourselves and our own North Star is what will bring us fulfillment and satisfaction. And I think what happens as we move into adulthood, we put a lot of our goals and dreams on the side. And there are some good examples in the storytelling in the book. We all know the famous story of the friend who wanted to be an anthropologist, but their parents talked them into being a dentist, or doing something more practical, where they could build a more practical career. In the book, there's a gentleman whose father said, I'm not going to pay for your college unless you study business. And this fellow really wanted to be a social worker and be in the social justice space. And at 50, after a successful 25-year business career, he kind of had a meltdown. And he said, I what am I doing here? I've abandoned myself. I've abandoned my dreams. And he went through a whole reinvention process, and he's now working in that space. So I like to say to people, if you're struggling a bit, did you get off track in terms of who you are and what you wanted to do and who you wanted to be? And, is it time for what I call a rewiring of your life? Because you have a second chance. You have a lot more time in your life. You can make the change to course correct so that you are being more true to yourself and your particular goals. And that's where the people come in, the reassessing of your relationships, because they're the ones that are going to have to support you as you say, I need to do this for myself. And I think a lot of I've talked to a lot of mothers who've become empty nesters and who spent a lot of time raising their children, sometimes in the workforce, sometimes not. And they're sort of going through this process of, I have a lot of me time now. And what do I want that me time to be? And do I reclaim something or do I start something new? And so I think there are times in your life where you go into this introspection. And being true to yourself is really the key thing.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends going through the same thing. And it's interesting. I was talking with one last night and she was telling me, gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I'm just focusing on her production work. I was like, oh my goodness. But at least it's good to have something to really focus on, when those things come up.
Yeah, I think, a lot of what I found with these reimagineers is it took a year or so to really develop the solid thinking and also the practical plan to put it in place. So I would always recommend, don't worry if you're not making that decision, in a week or a month or 2 months, but just get on the course and constantly be thinking about it over time and identifying what it is that you think you want to do. It takes time. And then, of course, there are lots of practical elements that go into it in terms of everyday practical things. So it is not something that just happens overnight. You've got to really put in the brain power and the sweat equity on it.
I know you talk in your book about curiosity being such an important trait. Why would you say that is?
Everyone who I spoke to who were able to find new paths and interesting new paths are by nature curious, excuse me. Many people said, what were some of the traits that you found with these people? They were confident, they were optimistic, they had a sense of can-do, they were curious, they were always thinking about what might be next for them in their life. And, the question is, are those innate traits or those learned traits? And how can you learn that trait? I think everybody has some level of curiosity just by being human. So what scale are you on a 1 to 10? And curiosity will lead you to places that are unique and different. I'll give you a great example. A woman who was long divorced, and she was always interested in the opera. And she and a couple of girlfriends had tickets to the opera. And she was always curious about new kinds of opera. And her girlfriend said one year they're not going to renew, but she decided she was going to renew because she was curious about what these new works would be. And she had a single seat for the season. And, a guy came in and sat next to her, a gentleman sat next to her, and they struck up a conversation. He was a widower. And they've now been married 20 years. And he's in his early 90s and she's in her 80s. And her curiosity led her to a place that actually she found love, in her 60s, out of a serendipity moment. So I think curiosity can work in lots of different ways and can impact your life in ways that are sometimes unexpected.
What a great story. You got to love that, all these synchronicities that kind of just, pay off, and curiosity is such a great way of getting there. You've done so many interviews. What's like one that really stands out for you?
I think one that I really loved was a woman named Stephanie, who was a long time book editor. She studied English in college. And at the age of 53, she decided she wanted to become a doctor, which, as you know, is a long journey. And she went back to school. She, by the way, found fellowship money and scholarship money. She went back to school and took biology and chemistry and organic chemistry. She applied to American medical schools and she basically, the undercurrent was that she was too old, which is a whole other topic about ageism, which we can get into. But she found her path through going to Caribbean medical school. She finished medical school. She came back. She did her, residency, et cetera. And then she's in her early 60s and she's a doctor. And she said, I could be a doctor for 20 years. And that's a great run. But what was interesting is during the process, she also went through a divorce. She had many barriers thrown in front of her, but she kept the course. She found ways to fund it, and she got to her goal. And she was just focused and relentless. And to me, it was a great story of courage and a great story of commitment. And, she's now going to be working in a field that she dreamt about when she was a young girl. So it was one of my favorite stories in the book.
I can see why. I mean, that's what a great beginning for her, a new beginning. So
yeah.
Well, and you briefly touched on reassessing, like our personal relationships. And I think it's probably a little valid with the story you just shared. So how is that something that we should really kind of consider? How does that play a part?
Well, I think let's start, we all have, many people have issues with family members. So let's start with the core. Sometimes you have a tough relationship with a parent, even as an adult, or a sibling or a child or an in-law. And, I think that you have to sometimes make some hard decisions that those people may not necessarily be, in your life. And that's a tough decision because it's family. But if it's a toxic relationship, you have to sort of acknowledge that. If it's irreparable, it is something. I mean, my own mother, did not have a relationship with her mother for almost 20 years until they finally found some common ground. But those are important things because the ones who are closest to you are the ones who are going to affect you most directly, whether it is supporting what you want to do or not. And so I think you start there. Then you go with friends. We all know friends that we had in our early 20s who 25 years later, they've the expiration date is on that friendship. And throughout our lives, we have to constantly be making new friends and identifying new people who are going to help us. And sometimes you have to make the decisions that those friends that you've had, are no longer going to be in your life because you've all changed. And then from there, you go to your work and your community. And, who are the people, who are your mentors, who are your work mentors, who are the people in your community who you admire, who you want to, associate with, and really surround yourself with those positive, good people who really see all of the amazing positives about you, the individual. And so I think it's almost like a circle. You start in the center with those closest to you, and then you move out to the far piece of the community. And it's a good process to go through because it really enlightens you about the people who are holding you up versus, keeping you down.
I think that would say a lot about also of where a person's mentality is as well, if they have a lot of people around them that are a little bit negative.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, sometimes that can also be the crutch. That can be a crutch because, it gets back to that negative self-talk. Well, I can't really go back to school because of XYZ, or I can't really change a career, or I can't really make a specific change because you're being held back by those negative forces that are in your everyday life. And so stepping out of that is really critical in order to move forward. Once again, think about this. If you're 60 and healthy, you may live another 30 years. So what are those 30 years going to represent for you? What do you want them to be? I like to say, go to 90 and then work backwards. What legacy, what contribution, what satisfaction, what imprint have you left on the planet and your family and your friends, and who is it that you want to be? I think, one of the great exercises, go to 90 and write your obituary. What have you done? And I think that puts a lot of focus for people because it identifies what it is that they want to do in their lives. And if you got 30 more years and you're 60, let's get at it. The old notion of, retirement as it's been defined is irrelevant today because of the long arc that we're going to live. So, but once again, you got to be, healthy and take care of yourself in order to have that kind of healthy life.
Yeah, thank goodness for that, So, and it's interesting when I look back in my childhood, I can remember people who were 50, 55, and they were just like ready to be done, it's like, and things have changed so much, thank goodness.
Well, think about this. In 1940, the average life expectancy was in the low 60s. And so you're right. I mean, the notion of retirement and Social Security and all that was created in the 1930s. And it's an old model because people did retire and they didn't live much longer. They had on average, once again, there were people who always lived older, but, a few years to really sort of enjoy that. But that's irrelevant today. It's completely an old story because we are going to, that's why I like to use the concept of rewiring when you finish a first career. I stepped out of a 42-year magazine publishing career, day-to-day career. And, I rewired by obviously writing this book. And I went back to school and did a master's degree at Columbia University. And I'm launching a new business next year. And I'm still running marathons. And, so I've rewired into a different kind of life. But it's not your traditional, it's not my father's retirement plan, so to speak.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. I mean, you're making overachievers look like slackers,
Yeah, I've got a lot of type A behavior. That's self-admitted.
Well, that's good though, in many ways, because you are, you're living what you preach, and I think it really provides people the roadmap that maybe are thinking about, gosh, how their parents or grandparents had retired.
Yeah, I think if you pick an area, I like to say when I'm doing talks to people, instead of thinking of what you were told you were supposed to do, flip it on its head. So for instance, why move to a retirement community when everybody is the same? You should be in an intergenerational community and neighborhood where you meet young people and, young parents and kids and sort of get a new perspective. It's very refreshing. Why do that? Or maybe instead of, moving to, in the Northeast, a lot of people move to Florida, maybe what you do is you stay where you are and, you build a different kind of life, where you are in terms of maybe you downsize or upsize, maybe instead of, if you're 75, maybe you build your dream house, why not? So I think what happens is as people, I like to say as we live longer versus as you get older, as we live longer, people historically make their lives smaller. And, I'm advocating that we make our lives bigger. We have bigger experiences and do things that we put off and, really turn it on its head and don't do what you think you're supposed to do what you want to do. I use the expression, forget age appropriate, be person appropriate, because you can do anything you want at any time in your life. Obviously within reason, you're not going to win a gold medal at the Olympics if you're in your 50s, but you could go to the Masters Olympics and you never know what might happen there.
That's great advice. Well, and where do you feel like people get stuck when they're trying to make this change?
We live in a very ageist culture, and that leads to self-imposed ageism. So just think about words. We talked a little bit about this already. Retire conjures up this notion of atrophy, age appropriate, midlife crisis. Maybe it's really a midlife awakening because we know a lot about ourselves. And then when you look at the images of people over 50 that are put out by advertisers and marketers, oftentimes they are, you look at them and you say, but wait a minute, that's not me. I'm not living a sedentary, passive life. I'm active and I'm technology savvy and I'm starting a new business or working in the nonprofit sector. Like we're the people that look like me. And so I think in our culture, the reinforcements that we get are those that have an ageist undercurrent, and we have to fight back against that, because we're gonna redefine what a second half of life can look like. And those after us, by the way, life expectancy is going to continue to grow. There are projections that by the year 2100, there will be 5.3 million people 100 years or older in the United States. So, while the average life expectancy today is almost pushing 80, it's going to continue to grow. And our kids and our grandchildren are going to have, seeing a 100-year-old is not going to be a novelty. So we need to have new words, new language, new images, because those things are the things that will give us the freedom to say, I can do this. So a lot of it is self-imposed, quite honestly, Marianne.
Yeah, I really appreciate in your book, you talk about self-forgiveness being such a great piece. And I would think that people really get stuck there.
Yeah, we all know that person who is still complaining about how their, high school boyfriend or girlfriend, dropped them. And they're, by the way, 45 years old, right? And so, it's kind of, we get stuck in these old things that really aren't relevant to our lives anymore. So, how do we let it go and just say, that was that, and things happened, and that forgiving yourself for a bad decision or releasing yourself from something that you might have, said or done or thought is really important in order to move forward. Like, why fester on it? Why fester on it?
Yeah, why keep focusing on something that's really in your rearview mirror instead of looking at what's ahead and what can be done?
Yeah, no, right, exactly. Absolutely.
Well, and you had talked about life layering, and I know our listeners are probably going, okay, what's that? And why would I do that?
Well, it's one of my favorite chapters in the book, because I started the process myself when I was 39 years old. And I thought all I was doing was working, and I was a really boring person, and I needed to have a little bit more multi-dimension in my life. So I decided that I was going to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa with a group of family and friends. I was going to go to race car driving school, and I was going to take a flying lesson, because I had always been my boyhood dream. And I became a pilot, and I've climbed many mountains. And what I realized is that my 40s, and my self-proclamation was my 40s were going to become my adventure years. And that became a layer in my life that to this day is still an active layer. And it didn't replace anything. It was additive to my business career, for example. And then in my 50s, I had another layer, which was all about creativity and photography and writing and so forth. And that was another layer. And so if you add these layers to your life over time, what happens is you've got this very rich and satisfying, I like to say, big layer cake of a rich experience. And for me, and for people who are, have had big seats that they sat in, like I did, professional seats, when you step out of that seat, you then have all those other layers working for you. So you're not identified by what you do and what your career has been. And I think a lot of people find themselves in that situation. They step out of their seat or their career and they're like, okay, now what? Now what am I going to do with myself? Well, if you start that process, and you can do it at any time in your life, it leads to a very fulfilling life.
Yeah, it's much more than a one-dimensional thing, but that's what so many people do. You don't hear of people that really move beyond the work zone that they have.
Yeah, I think that I don't want to generalize, but I think men in particular have had that problem. They're much more sort of one-dimensional on that front. But I think that it's so critical to even start when you're in your 30s and 40s. I mean, start building the things, your parallel lives that are going to be important to you, whether it's through a creative process, or through a nonprofit volunteer process, or through starting a small business on the side, whatever it is. that can build your, personal resume, so to speak, especially as you ultimately, transition out of a first career or into a second career. One of those things might become a second career, which happens a lot as well with people.
Yeah, you end up developing a passion for something you never really realized you could develop a passion for.
Yeah. And a lot of times I say to people, go back to your younger self. What was it that you gave up that was really something you wanted to pursue? Was it music? Was it, painting? Was it writing? One of the great stories in the book is a woman who always wanted to be a writer, and she was a sales executive for many, many years. And when she was in her mid 50s, she decided, okay, I'm going to really focus on this now. And she started taking a lot of courses and seminars, et cetera. And she started writing, and she wrote her first novel. And as she described it, she had over 100 rejections from publishers, but she kept the focus. And to make a long story short, she had her first novel published at the age of 62. She's now 66, and she's on her fifth novel. And she is, she says to the world, I'm going to be a novelist for the rest of my life. So my interest, my passion, my creative hobby became something more. And now at 66, I'm going to write for the rest of my life. And maybe she has another, 20 years or so to write more novels. And so I think that's a good example of how, she went back to her younger self and said, I've always really wanted to be a writer. And she then focused on that. And she's having a great satisfaction with it.
That is so exciting. You hear people, succeed in what they're passionate about. I understand you have a long list of things you still want to tackle. What's on your list?
What's on my list is, when I studied this course at Columbia University on nonprofit philanthropy, I learned about social purpose businesses. And these are businesses that have a double bottom line, both profit and purpose. And I'm focusing on trying to get into that space next year with a couple of business ideas, because I think it's important for all of us to give back in lots of ways. I serve on multiple nonprofit boards. I have my own foundation. I've been a lifelong, had a lifelong commitment to giving back to the community. And we all have to do that in whatever way works for us individually. So I want to do more of that. I want to do more giving back, more entrepreneurialism. I'm going to be out. I'm out on a tour with this book. So I'm still going to run another marathon. I'm going to still go. I've been to 124 countries, Marianne, and I've got a list of others that I want to go visit and explore. I just took the 8 family members, the kids and younger kids, to Ireland for this summer for a couple of weeks, because our family is Irish on my father's side. I want to expose more of the younger kids in the family to new things. So I could go on and on and on, but it's that level of engagement and curiosity that keeps me going.
It sounds like you're building that for the next generation too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have in my family, whenever one of the kids turns 16, they get a trip to Outward Bound. And, that's a great leadership course for young people and for adults. But I think, what I like to do is to, serve up experiences to the next generation. And then let's see what sparks, and that could be everything from athletics, like a ski trip or an Outward Bound trip, to something that is more cultural in terms of taking them to their first symphony orchestra performance, or it's so great to watch young kids sort of spark to what it is that interests them. Our 11-year-old who took his first trip to Ireland, and we took him hiking into the beautiful hills of Ireland, and he was just dazzled by it. And so I could see already that this is something he's thinking about for his future. So that gives a great reward to see that happen with younger people, but also people of all ages. So, I think that's another form of giving.
Well, my goodness, Michael, I mean, we can talk forever on your book. I really had great appreciation for everything that you wrote in it. I felt it was very impactful. Where can our listeners connect with you, be part of your community, and learn more about your work?
Well, thank you for asking. There's an author's website, roarbymichaelclinton.com. I'm on LinkedIn under my name, and also Twitter under my name, and Roar has its own Facebook page. And if you go onto the author's website, we're going to start a newsletter so they can sign up there to start building a community for the Roar message, the positive Roar message. And, the book is available in print, on Kindle, Audible. So whatever flavor you like, and it's on every platform from Amazon to Barnes & Noble to your independent bookstore. So we're out there. The book launched in September. So we are very much out getting this important message out that you can have an incredible second half of your life if you step back and think about all the possibilities for you as an individual.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It was such a great pleasure to be with you, Marianne, and thank you for inviting me, and get ready to roar.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your book, Roar, into the second half of your life. Roar is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.